Hey jabronis, it's that time again where we talk about tier lists, alright? And this time we're going to talk about Overdress tier list because it's new, it's fresh, it's exciting. And Springfest is coming up soon, so you might want to know what's good, what's bad. And actually the set's coming out very soon, so in English, right? So if you want to buy stuff, it's a perfect time to see what's strong. If I want to be a real meta dog, what ones should I invest in? Or if you want to be an edgy boy and play the worst deck, well, this will kind of help you out there too, except it's not that hard to realize what is the worst deck. So let's jump into this. I've actually changed a bit the tier list. As you see here, there's A+ and A, because I feel like the top tiers in Overdress at the moment is not that far apart. So instead of having like the traditional S and then A, and then people going, why is like this an S when it should be an A? Because one's S and one's A. No, they're both A's, except one's like an A+, right? So there's not that much difference. Except, getting an A+ just means your Asian parent is much more proud of you in your exams. Maybe we should add like an A++, right? The more pluses, the better. Right? But anyway, let's get started with the first top tier deck of the format, and that is Bastion, right? I think a lot of people saw this coming. It's simple. Bastion, very, very strong, very aggressive. And the key thing about Bastion is that, well, two key things actually, is that you cannot control its aggression, right? Normally when you play an aggressive deck, you can slow it down by, attacking rear guards, deny him counterblast so he, doesn't have any ways to use abilities. But the thing is, with Bastion, you don't need to counterblast to attack 4 times. You just need to trigger well. You need to trigger grade 3s. Well, actually, you need to trigger poorly, right? Because you want to not trigger triggers to get 4 attacks, but you also want to trigger a trigger somewhere there so you can, get extra power. So, yeah, with Bastion, it's very consistently... It's consistent in its aggression, I guess, is the correct way to say it. And going first or second, sure, going first, you have the opportunity to just steamroll your opponent because you hit dumb numbers for no reason. But it can still pull off a pretty aggressive game when it goes second. So overall, I think the reason here that you cannot control Bastion, the only thing, by controlling this counterblast, you control how much you can draw, which is okay, but at the same time, you don't need to draw if you just kill your opponent, right? So I think Bastion, just that strong, it's consistently aggressive, and if you're not good at the game, then I think Bastion's a perfect fit, because you don't need to really think much. The player, when playing Bastion, is literally an automated trigger flipper, and if they're not good at flipping cards off the top of their deck, then they'll fail with Bastion. But at the same time, if you're a really, really good player, playing Bastion is literally just playing SGD or 7Cs or something like that, where you don't need that much skill to play it, but it can perform very, very well, right? So Bastion, I think, is quite top tier. I don't know if I'd bring this to a tournament simply because I'd be like, oh, it's very Gavrili, right? It's kind of Casino, but it's not a bad pick. It's honestly not a bad pick. So Bastion there, nice knights and angels and things like that. The other good top tier deck here is Bruce, all right? Bruce is just very consistent overall. People do complain that going second means that you're 1 turn slower, but I think it's not bad. It's not as bad as people say it is. Overall, it's a very consistent deck. Again, you cannot really control the deck. It doesn't use much CB at all. It has some decent defensive options with Brody as well. And getting 5 attacks off, you only need a Soul Blast, so you don't need Counterblast. So very hard to control that. You naturally just build up your soul anyway. So overall, I think, Bruce just, it's consistent, it does its job well, and I think a lot of players is pretty much just a choice between Bastion and Bruce, based on just which one do you like better, right? Let's talk about the worst deck in the current format, and that is Eugene. Eugene, only one word you can really sum up Eugene is it's clunky, so it's pretty bad, right? It doesn't really do anything well, and then its main gimmick is just a kind of a meme gimmick, where you kind of, if I retired something with no cards, I can call a free field, but my whole field is garbage anyway, so, yeah. Eugene needs a lot of work. If you want to be a slot machine dealer, then, you can play Eugene. If you want to be an edgy boy, sure, Eugene. It's 1 cent, probably. I mean, English has its tax, so it'll probably be $1, $2 for, a Eugene deck. Overall, it's just, yeah, it needs a lot of work. I don't think Festival Collection is going to help it much, just from the reveals that we got. It seems pretty mess, so we're probably waiting for set 2 for it to really come out with anything decent. So maybe if you believe in the Eugene stocks right now, go buy the stuff, and then maybe it'll go up in price when set 2 comes out, right? But I think there's going to be a lot of stuff getting cracked, so don't worry about that too much. Now, let's talk a bit about Barrow Magnus. Okay, Barrow Magnus, I think, is an A, right? It's just under the top 2. I feel like it's got a lot of strength and potential. Very strong, very high roll kind of thing. If you can hit that 15 soul off, you're winning really hard. You really can't, you can kind of control the CB of this deck, but at the same time it has Selfish Engraver, so if they just need to use one CB at a turn when they've reached 15 soul, you really can't stop it. They just put in that Selfish Engraver and bam, they're starting to, they'll just do their combo and win, right? Otherwise, if they're still building up their soul, then maybe you can control their CB a bit, but you really want to push this deck high very quickly, because after they get the 5 attack combo set up, it's only a matter of time until you're dead, right? Until you're dead. But at the same time, they don't have much hand, so if you really didn't push them well, then they have a lot of damage to work with and can kind of kill you out. But if you've been pushing them a lot, then you can probably kill them really fast, and then once they set up that 15 soul combo, they still can't kill you faster than you can kill them, right? So I think that's fine. The only thing about this deck is that it's slightly inconsistent, I think. When you get this 15 soul one-off, you like just go just destroy them, right? At the same time, if you kind of brick a bit, you don't get enough pieces to increase your soul count. You're just sitting there going, well, I'm CB1 drawing one every turn. Feels bad, man. So I think it's less consistent than the top tier deck, but it can definitely high roll harder than the top 2 decks as well. Another deck that's really been popping up is Zolga. I think Zolga is really good. Again, I think it's in A because of its consistency issues. It's also a 3 attacker deck, so kind of those 2 things are really annoying for the deck, right? You need to have a good early game in order to push hard, because you don't get to multi-attack, but you get huge amounts of power. You can kind of get a free field as well. You can kind of grind your opponent, but at the same time you mill a lot, so well, you mill enough that you will kind of deck out first. So kind of a bit of contradiction there, but when the whole engine gets up and going, you get your events that can kind of mill things. I mean, your orders can mill things and set up a full field. Then you're basically smooth sailing, hit those big numbers, smash your opponent, pop up your big shields, and you can kind of win. Right? Again, the only reason why it's an A is, like, let's say you don't get your mill forward order early on. I feel like if you miss that, you really miss a big push turn with a lot of free power. And also, if you miss there's those really dodgy situations where you just don't have an order card in your hand to do your Alchemagic. And if you don't do that, that's basically like a free turn for your opponent. You kind of just res a Mantis, you call a Mantis, and you go, oh, yeah. That's good times, right? Not a lot of power though. So when you have those bad turns, you get set back really quickly, and you don't really have a way to really come back because, again, 3 attacker deck, you don't have 5 attacks, so that's the weakness of it. If we have more consistent ways to trigger off our Alchemagic every single turn, like ensure that, rather than sometimes you're gonna miss it, or you just don't set up a big push combo early on, then I think if we fix those issues, it definitely goes up into like an A, right? It definitely goes up right here. Overall, I think this and Barrow Magnus are literally the same. Like, you can kind of interchange them and kind of they're fine. So I think this is kind of pretty good where it is. Dragon Empire, Nirvana, I was gonna put it here, but I feel like I should put it in B, right? Because I definitely feel this deck is weaker than the top 4. And that is because it's very easily controlled and it's not really flexible in how you build it, right? So everyone pretty much knows how a Dragon Empire, well, Nirvana deck works now and how it's built. So you can probably put in some of the crit Triceratops or whatever from the Eugene stuff, put it in there and get some more pressure. But the problem right now is, again, very easy to control. They don't really gain much soul unless you Persona Ride, and then they need CB for literally everything, and they don't have counter charge. So you go, oh, they've done their two tricks to push, right, on turn 3. Let's kill those 2 cards, start controlling them, make them like commit a lot from their hand, and suddenly their pushes become weaker and weaker, and you just kind of can, based on what deck you're playing, kind of farm up a hand and kind of win from there, right? And if they don't draw arcs early on, they literally don't break even, right? Like, they don't get advantage with Nirvana. So, like, arcs kind of breaks even. So if they don't get that, they're falling far behind. And yeah, it feels bad, man. It feels bad. So I feel like because the deck is so easily controlled versus everything else, we put it at a B, right? The only other deck that can be kind of controlled is Zolga. But again, Zolga, sure, you have like your Spirit Body Condensation, which is the Soul Blast one, and that can kind of Alchemy Magic with something else. If you pop it with the Mill 4 order, so you basically can get a free turn. So it's, although it can be controlled, it stops you from using like Grief and Despair, but you know, you have other ways to make a big field, and you do get like, this and Zolga are kind of the same, you get 3 attacks, but Zolga hits that much harder, much more consistent, much more annoying to play against, versus Nirvana, which is like, I hope I draw my arcs. Yeah. So that goes in B. Of course, it can still make up a big aggressive plays early on, but I think B is where it's at. That means we've got a bunch of other cards, other decks, and where should they go, right? Where should they go? I feel like Hexa Orb is just a C. And at the beginning, I was going, Hexa Orb is pretty good. You know, you can, it's similar to Zolga, and that makes big columns, but you can bit less. But after playing Zolga more, I'm just like, wow, Zolga is just much more higher ceiling, much more bigger plays, bigger columns, everything is free. Hexa Orb, not the same thing. It's just very linear, very boring base. Basically have to pray you trigger to do anything, so I think it goes to the C. Orfist, kind of the same deal. 3 attacker clan, not clan, 3 attacker deck archetype. You have your nice welds that are like, oh, welds, nice. They kind of cycle through your deck. And then you can make like 15k shadow tokens. Like, oh yeah, nice, 15k shadow tokens. And you're like, oh man, my Orphis looks like a Chaos Breaker, but that's kind of it. That's as far as it goes. Overall, I think it's missing. Every time I told you before, every time I'm playing this deck, I feel like I'm just 1 turn short. Everything else is like slightly faster than this deck. And although you can make nice, cool 15ks, it's just not enough. It's not enough. So this, I feel like with just a bit more support, this can definitely go a bit higher. But right now, versus everything else, is just not there. Magnolia is a big one. I feel like I'm personally not a huge fan of Magnolia. Just saying, I don't like the way it's played. It's very clunky, and the reliance on its Persona ride is just kind of annoying. But people have had some success with it. I feel like it's like either somewhere here or like here. I definitely not there. I definitely think it's not as good as these guys in A and A plus, but I think it's gonna be like a B or a C. Like, okay, it's a very boring deck in that, sure, when you can make multi attacks, 4 attacks, nice, but you don't really have ways. Again, you can like, your counterblast can be controlled, and if you don't Persona ride, your overall power line is just not strong enough, or your big plays are not strong enough. Of course, if you Persona ride and you get 6 attacks and you time it perfectly with like some big combos, you can really kill your opponent. You get 6 huge attacks, right? But when you don't, it just feels super clunky, and just, you're like going, why am I here? Why am I here, right? So I feel like this is somewhere here. I think it's in B. I definitely think it's better than these guys though, because there's much more power plays and big plays with this deck than Orfist and Hexa Orb. But apart from that, I think everything else is better. And lastly, we've got Prison, Seraph Snow. I think Seraph Snow kind of goes here. So why is it so low? I know Japan rates this very high. Personally speaking, Seraph Snow, the Prison deck, doesn't really do well against Bastion, because you can easily play around Seraph Snow. Bruce doesn't have a field. Well, the field goes into Soul or disappears, and then since they don't use CB, they just get everything out of the prison. Go here. Good luck, bro. Barrow Magnus again doesn't really, you know, have a field, so you can never really reach that condition. The only deck that does build a field is kind of Zolga, right? So you can definitely get rid of all of Zolga's stuff, but then Zolga kind of doesn't care. I guess it does care because it can't really res its like null guards and its or its sentinels, or it's like over triggers and bounce it back to hand, because you can just prison them away. But then they don't really care if you prison it away, because prison's just a pretty weak mechanic, right? So yeah, that's the only deck it's good against. Against like we've seen the plays against Nirvana, where Nirvana just drops its trickster into the back row, and the prison deck kind of goes, okay, what do I do? Maybe I attack regards the whole game. Not a bad choice. And then against Stoicheia, it's good against Stoicheia again, because Stoicheia really doesn't have that much counterblast and soul blast available to it. The resources are very limited, so I guess that is a good matchup against that. But Magnolia kind of just does better against everything else than Seraph Snow, so that's why it's higher. And Seraph Snow kind of does well against Orfist. Getting rid of the shadow tokens for free is really annoying. Hexa Orb doesn't really commit much, so you can kind of get away with just committing like 2 facades, and you go, no prison for you, right? But because Hexa Orb is just like whatever, yeah, that's why Seraph Snow is better. And Eugene, everyone's just Eugene is free, man. Eugene is free. So Yeah, that's right. So I think this is basically the tier list. Some changes can be made as we see more developments in the metagame, of course. There could be some crazy stuff happening, and we go, woo, let's change the tier list a bit. But this is kind of the first tier list that I'm going to do for Overdress, and with Bastion and Bruce at the top. Followed very closely by Zolga and Baron Magnus, and then we've got the Nirvana, Magnolia, and the Seraph Snow Train in B, just under that, and then C is just Hexdrum and Orphis. I think basically everything from A+ to B is playable. You're gonna see it at the tournament a lot, and then C and F. When C, it's gonna pray for those triggers, you know, pray for luck to be on your side. And then, actually no, I'm gonna put Orphis just a bit higher than Hexdrum. But yeah, in F is just like Eugene, you just I don't know. Go play something else, right? So that's it for me. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!